Welcome back to the third of the series of discussion on politics and social movement. Again, we have Mr. Susil Sirivardhana, an Oxford graduate, senior civil servant, and also social activist. In this discussion, we are going to focus on examples of social movements in Sri Lanka and elsewhere of the world. And I would like to ask from you, Susil, about human sufferings. You know, people have a lot of problems. They are poor, they don't have jobs, and they have educational problems, transport problem. You know, there are a lot of things. So how these issues can be, or how these issues have converted into social movements in the.
Yeah, I mean, social movements, in other words, rise against social injustice.
Yeah.
On a large scale. And a good example of that would be the ethnic conflict, meaning that the Tamil people felt that they were being discriminated against over a long period of time, and that they were a second-class citizen.
That's right.
And for example, as a result of 1956 and Sinhala becoming the state language, that state of exclusion became fixed and in law. And so when negotiation failed, I mean, they rose up in revolt. So in other words, when democratic systems and institutions fail to resolve conflicts, you know, parliaments fail to nip them in the bud and provide ways out for them, then you invariably get into a conflict situation. If you are reflecting on why they happen and why they can't be avoided, I would say that they are due to a lack of vision and democratic practice on the part of leaderships of governments, you know. And so.
Yeah. When I asked from Susil whether he can come for this discussion, the first thing he did was he gave me this book and read, right? I was keeping this book for about 3 weeks. Now, this is New Social Movements in the South, written by Ponna Vignaraja. So, Susil, how, in the light of the theoretical debate of this book, how can we understand practically social movements of Sri Lanka?
Well, there have been 2 categories of social movements in Sri Lanka. I think that book also mentions what are called the old social movements.
Yes.
And as the title suggests, the new social movements.
Yes.
By all social movements, they mean the social movements that started in the early part of the 20th century, like the trade union movement, like the cooperative movement, like the farmers' associations, agricultural peasant associations, etc. And the new social movements really emerged after the Second World War around new themes like the women's movement or movements for information or the student movement, for example. So those are, and the movements of the poor.
Yeah.
You see, the famous Chipko movement in northern India, when the peasants of Garhwal, the Himalayan state, rose up to prevent their forests being felled by large outside contractors, you know, a very dramatic social movement was born. Very solid, strong social movement was born.
Yeah.
And they succeeded in getting the attention of the whole world and, you know, saving their forests.
Yeah.
You see, and there what was very important was the women. It was the women who led. Or if you again take the examples of the Grameen Bank and what is called BRAC, BRAC exists in Sri Lanka also as a microfinance institution, but the original BRAC, which that acronym stands for Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee. It's a powerful movement of the poorest of the poor women in Bangladesh. Both the Grameen Bank and BRAC, which run into millions, the membership runs into millions, and which are countrywide, are women's movements. So these are the new social movements. They were not there before the Second World War.
I don't know whether the social movement that I talk belongs to old or new, maybe most probably old. When I read the history, one of the problems I have is that our kind of leftist labor movement some time back, they didn't like to incorporate Indian plantation Tamil workers in their union. They were really, as I see, kind of ethnically, ethnocentric movements. Because they didn't incorporate some of the ethnic groups, those ethnic groups happen to fight individually for their liberation. In that sense, one social movement has given the birth for another social movement. How do you see this, sir?
Yes, the fundamental cause for the fragmentation that you're talking about along ethnic lines, which is very unfortunate, is because we never became a nation. Whereas India, through its independence struggle, they overcame all their divisions and they united themselves into a nation to fight the common enemy. We didn't succeed in uniting ourselves in that sense into a common nation. And instead of becoming a nation, what we had was a conflict between majoritarianism, the singular majority community, and minoritarianism against the Tamil, the Muslims, and so on and so forth. And it is that ultimately resulted in the 30-year protracted ethnic war. Now, very interestingly, and it is tragic that no government and no political party has attempted to correct this, even after 1948, where we've had so much conflict. And in that context, the government that was started by President Sirisena on January, with the January 8th presidential victory, for the first time made national unity and nation building a priority platform of their governance. And he has been speaking about it on Independence Day in 2015. He mentioned it and he said, the time has come for healing and unifying all the communities. Because he was obviously thinking about the very bitter memories of singular Muslim clashes,
that's right.
The conflicts in Alutgama, etc., and quite apart from the 30-year-old war. And here was a politician who, for the first time, was prioritizing the issue of nation building and putting it right on top of the agenda.
As students of politics and social movement, there's a problem. Students are confused. Should social movement always involve with weapons? Can there be social movements without weapons? Like we have experienced LTT movement and JVP. They were having weapons. How do you explain?
The best example would be Gandhi.
Yes.
I mean, the Gandhian movements. Gandhi was a person, who practiced, who innovated in the sense of carrying on a political struggle, which is about power, by practicing ahimsa, and self-reliance. And same with people like Tagore. They believed in self-reliance, but self-reliance where internationalism also was a part of their self-reliance. And certainly, you can think of social movements where weaponry and arms are not involved. I mean, armed struggle is only one element, one prominent and pretty obvious element of political struggle, which in the process of the movement and the building up the movement and the struggle, which envelops the social groups also in its...
Yeah. Can I ask from you a critical question? As you see, what are the weaknesses of the social movements that we have experienced so far? We experienced JVP revolution twice and also LTT movement. What were the weaknesses of them?
Yeah, the weaknesses of them were that they were all products of one kind of nationalism or the other.
Okay.
Nationalism doesn't produce a united nation, doesn't help us to create. In fact, nationalism of the type that we've had divided us.
That's right.
And, prevented us from becoming a nation. So that kind of nationalism weakens and, sustains a conflict situation without resolving.
Yeah.
You have to go beyond nationalism and think in a much broader sense.
Yeah, that is the important point I was trying to ask from you. So nationalism to globalization, they say we live in a globalized world. So in the globalized context, what would be the shape of the future social movements of Sri Lanka or broader sense South Asia?
Globalization is, of course, a worldwide condition. And still, at a national level, or at a country level, I mean, social movements would very much have a continuing role to play. And then, as we've seen in a very interesting phenomenon called the World Social Forum, the WSF, which I think met for the first time in 2000 or something in Porto Alegre in Argentina. This was an attempt to create a counter to the movement of the capitalist leaders of the industrialized countries of Davos. And the World Social Forum was based on the unification of all movements that believed in socialism and, were anti-capitalist. And there was a big ferment, naturally, in Latin America. And it is in Latin America that all these different subaltern groups got together and formed a world social movement. And that world social movement has learned a lot of lessons, and in the context of new social movements, that would be the newest, with many, many new ideas and angles. For example, it is not based nationally. The world social movement is not based nationally. It doesn't have a single all-encompassing name, like, say, the former Marxist international movements, like the First International, Second International. It's changing, varied mix of movements, different movements that get together for a common purpose. So periodically they get together, they recognize the need for diversity, they recognize the need for certain values, anti-capitalist values, but apart from that, they are not trying to get into a uniform, monolithic, huge, monumental scale, into a single social organization which will have to consist of leaders and chairmen and so on. It's a diversified, fluid group.
Yeah, that discussion on globalization really connect us to local situation to global situation. Today we have seen most of the Sri Lankans are protesting in the other cities of the world, New York, London, Melbourne, Sydney. They are fighting for local issues. So that is the extent of globalization. During this discussion, we were talking about social movements, and we drew a lot of examples from Sri Lanka and also South Asia. Of course, this discussion may not end here. This would start another series of discussion. We all, with the help of others in the society, we can really continue this debate. Thank you very much, Susil Sirivardhana, for participating in this discussion. Thank you again.